He's the best midfielder in the world at the moment.
The football season is in full swing on BBC Sounds.
They've still got their best football to play, which is huge.
With everything to play for in the Premier League and Champions League.
It's an enormous win that will give them hope.
Hear the latest news, insight and analysis with Football Daily.
We want to see emotions, we want to see players that care.
If they can get momentum going in the league, they can take that into both competitions.
And listen to games as they happen on BBC Radio 5 Live.
What an incredible game.
Listen on BBC Sounds.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello there and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast, coming to you from the Portuguese capital Lisbon. This special episode is a slight departure from the norm for us, as we're going to be previewing Rangers Europa League last 16 tie with Benfica, and what a European run it's been so far for the Ibrox side. Will we see a repeat of that remarkable result against Betis?
Roof in is a goal! Rangers in front again, it's Kemar Roof! What a story this could be!
We'll also find out what sort of opponents Benfica will be.
It'll be an interesting one, because I think when you look at Rangers' strengths as well and look at where Benfica's weaknesses are, they sort of align.
And we'll hear from Philippe Clement ahead of the game.
We're going to go full. For this game, we're going to go full in the weekend, and we're going to go full Thursday again, and we're going to go like that until the end of the season.
This is the Scottish Football Podcast.
So thanks very much for downloading and streaming and listening. It's good to have you with us. I'm joined here in Lisbon on the eve of the big match by the former Rangers and Scotland striker and sports scene presenter and Sports Sound pundit, Steven Thompson, who reliably informs me today that we are 100 days out from Scotland taking on Germany in the opening match of Euro 2024. He's very excited.
What I thought that is, yes, I saw it actually on Instagram. So I informed you, now you've informed the listeners. They'll already know, but 100 days doesn't seem that far away. Cannot wait.
It does not. Lisbon, did you ever play here?
I don't think so. No, I don't think I did. Okay. Unless you're going to tell me I did I?
I haven't actually looked.
Right. No, I
was just thinking I'd ask you while I was here.
Definitely played against Porto, but that's different.
Good. Well, let's get down to it. How confident are you, Tomo, ahead of the match, of Rangers' prospects of getting through this tie?
I think they can be positive. I think obviously coming away to a team with such a big history in European football like Benfica is going to be difficult, but Benfica have their own troubles at this minute in time. Obviously everybody will be aware of their result at the weekend when they were thumped 5-0 by Porto, and since then there's been quite a lot of disruption, should you say, team meetings, crisis meetings. They've got several key players missing, so it's probably a good time to be getting them, although sometimes when a team's just been beaten badly, they can have a reaction to that. Rangers, of course, lost themselves at the weekend for the first time in a long time, so it'll be interesting to see how they react. I think they've got to get back to Ibrox, and it's good that the second leg's back at Ibrox. They've got to get back there, still very much in the tie. And what is still in the tie, I think even if they were to lose 1-0 here, I don't think that would be a terrible result. But I'm confident that they're capable of doing better than that against this Benfica side.
Yeah, Ibrox has been such a layer for them in Europe, hasn't it? Particularly that run to the final 2 years ago in this competition. You were talking about the result against Porto for Benfica at the weekend. It's actually a couple of really bad results they've had. They were knocked out of the Portuguese Cup during the week there before the Porto match by their city rivals here, Sporting, which I think has put a heck of a lot of pressure on Coach Schmidt coming into this one. You were highlighting the issues that he's had. What sort of game are you expecting here? Because when you look at, you were in Seville last time, when you look at that match and you contrast that with the second leg of the Champions League playoff against PSV, what were the improvements made by Rangers between those matches to get such a positive result that's ended up giving them the chance to be seeded for this and have that home leg second?
Well, there was a lot of positive things happened out in Seville. I think first and foremost, Rangers defended well, which they have been doing. They've got the best defence in the Scottish Premiership up until the weekend. That was when both goals that they lost were uncharacteristically poor for how they've been defending in recent times. But they'll be asked questions tomorrow night, there's no doubt about that. So first and foremost, they have to defend well. I think at the other end, obviously offering a threat it's going to be interesting to see what happens in terms of wide players. I think you could pick a large percentage of the team, but obviously young McCausland came off at the weekend with that injury from the tackle, so will he be fit to play?
It looks as though he's taken part in training before the team headed out here.
That's a positive, certainly, for Rangers. But in wide areas, Cortez now injured, and he looked like a good signing, certainly from kind of early signs. On the other side, will Dujon Sterling play? We know he's not a winger or a wide player in terms of a real attacking sense, but maybe it's a good game to play him in that wide area just for a bit more of a kind of defensive minded player. He's obviously very physical as well, very athletic, so maybe his legs will be required tomorrow night. I read a bit this morning about the Portuguese team suggesting that Rangers will be direct and Rangers will be physical, and they've got to match that.
Imagine that, it's Scottish stereotype.
I know, it's disgusting, isn't it? But so they're expecting it to be like that, and Rangers have been more direct since Philippe Clement arrived, but they've been effective with that. So, I mean, away ties in European football are just so incredibly difficult, and obviously there's a lot of pressure on Benfica to turn around this week that they've had and get a positive result. But as I said, for Rangers, it's all about coming back to Ibrox in the tie, and you would fancy Rangers at Ibrox in this competition, maybe not so much the Champions League, but in this competition you would fancy them at home to beat virtually anybody that's in it. So that's the key thing. It really is so important.
Yeah, we're recording this on the eve of the match, of course. The Rangers players making their way to Lisbon as we record. We'll hear from the Rangers manager on the podcast as well. That game against Motherwell, I covered the match for Sportsound on Saturday. How surprised were you by that result? And it's difficult to kind of, I guess, read too much into it. It was a first home defeat for Clement as Rangers manager. Yeah. They'd won 11 successive games for the first time since 92-93 before that one. So there'll be no panic buttons being pushed. And obviously what happened in Tynecastle on Sunday almost hit the reset button on it.
Yeah, it did. It was an incredible weekend, to be honest with you, Liam. But yeah, I was surprised. I didn't think that Rangers would go to the end of the season winning every single game, because, regardless of how good they've been, it's very difficult to keep that momentum going, to keep that level of performance going over such a long period of time.
And I know they lost to Celtic, but this is the first time he's really having to come through a little period of adversity.
A wee bit of adversity. I mean, let's be honest, it's just one result. And if Rangers had taken their chances and been more clinical on the day, they might ended up having won the game. I think the most disappointing thing for him was they were a bit profligate, and also at the other end, as I mentioned earlier, defensively the 2 goals they lost were pretty cheap, and they coughed up another couple of chances actually. Theo Bair could maybe have had another goal. So yeah, I was surprised, especially with it being at Ibrox, but it's all about the reaction. It's all about showing that they're capable of reacting to that wee bit of adversity, as you mentioned. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I mean, it's different playing in Europe to resetting in the Scottish Premiership with our next Premiership game. Of course, they've got the Cup this weekend, which will be a really difficult tie. And when you kind of look into the kind of travel out here for this game, which will be exceptionally difficult, to then travelling home and then obviously down to Easter Road on Sunday, which will be a difficult game because Hibernian have picked up recently.
They
certainly
have, yeah.
So it's actually a big 4 or 5 days for Rangers.
Yeah, I mean, they do rely on Ibrox a lot in European ties, but it's fair to say they have had positive results away from home over the course of the last couple of years. You think of Dortmund, the Betis game last time, the draw in Prague against Sparta as well. Well, I did hint about it a little earlier. Let's hear now from the Rangers manager, Philippe Clement, who's been speaking to the assembled media at the Estadio de Luz ahead of the big first leg.
This is the Scottish Football Podcast.
There was some people of the board who told me that before our European game, that it was maybe more important that we won the League Cup. And I told them I'd never work that way, because I want players who are hungry for every occasion and want to win every occasion. So it doesn't work that way. It's not like a menu in a restaurant that you pick out, okay, now we're going to perform, and they're not. Like this, you don't create a winning culture. So, okay, it's a busy schedule. Yes, that's true. It's about us working really hard with all the players, all the staff, to get the players ready, and it's about the players themselves also to show that they're ready for that kind of competition. So we're going to go full for this game. We're going to go full in the weekend, and we're going to go full Thursday again, and we're going to go like that until the end of the season.
For everything you need to know about your team this season, download the BBC Sport app. All the latest news, goal updates, stats and scores, and insight and analysis. Just select your club to get the biggest stories and best content at your fingertips. What a result. Download the BBC Sport app for everything you need to know about your team this season.
Philippe Clement there. So, what sort of approach, Stephen, do you expect him to take at Benfica's own stadium in front of what will be a huge crowd, I would imagine?
There's two ways to look at it. I mean, Benfica obviously will be a wee bit fragile after the last couple of results. So do you try and be on the front foot and kind of go at them? It's very difficult to kind of have that approach in an away European tie. Or do you sit in and try and contain and hope to counter them and create chances of your own? It'll be interesting to see how Philippe Clement does approach the game. He doesn't really kind of change the way that he sets up. You know, it might be different personnel at times, but generally it's the same sort of way of playing. They will try to be direct. They will try to get in behind, and you'd expect Benfica after the weekend there to come out the traps and really try and get at Rangers and make a positive start to get the crowd that will be no doubt on their, having been on their backs, get them on their side very early on in the game. I'm pretty sure that'll be Benfica's game plan. So it's maybe about just riding that early storm for Rangers and making sure they don't concede in the first 15-20 minutes and stay in the game and try and build their way into the game.
You were talking about a couple of the players who are, missing through injury, and that is a problem right now. 9 or 10 first team squad members aren't available for this one. You almost forget about Abdallah Sima, who'd such a brilliant first half of the season. Cantwell obviously is out. Ryan Jack's been in and out of things. They've had problems, haven't they, with regards to injuries? Danilo, another one.
Yeah, I think they have, but I think the one thing I would say that I like about Philippe Clement is he's never mumped and moaned about that. He said, okay, one player goes out, it gives another player an opportunity to come in and show me that he can be in the team. And generally that's happened. We've seen the manager make changes on a weekly basis. I think looking at the schedule, he's been doing that with an eye to keeping players fresh, and generally it has worked for him. But there's no doubt injuries, especially for me in the wider areas, is a problem for Rangers moving forward. I think generally you can look at obviously the goalkeeper, Tavernier, Goldson, and most recently Yilmaz. You would expect them to play. Of course, John Lundstrom, who's been a revelation under Philippe Clement. Diomande and Tom Lawrence would make up the midfield trio, if you like. Then Sterling, I think, will start. So it's up to see who's the other wide player. And then up front, do you go with Dessers or do you go with Silva?
Interesting one, given Silva would know, he came through the Porto academy, but he'd be fully aware, fully immersed.
He knows
in
the
Portuguese
game over
football,
here, 100%, and whether that might give him a wee edge, to get the nod over Dessers. It wasn't Dessers' finest game on Saturday against Motherwell, so it wouldn't surprise me to see Silva start.
So what sort of opponents will Benfica be? To find out, Alistair Lamont's been speaking to Portuguese football expert Aaron Barton.
Aaron, we need to start by discussing that incredible result at the weekend for Benfica. I mean, I know Rangers lost, surprisingly, but I mean, I just couldn't get over the scoreline. 5-0 away to Porto, having lost the previous match against Sporting as well in the Portuguese Cup. Is this then a good time for Rangers to be playing them, do you think?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I think this season the performances in Europe have been poor, but at least they've held it together in the league. They've stayed sort of at the top or just a couple of points off, usually every single match week. But it feels like they're starting to maybe fall apart a little bit. I think the last 3 big games that they've played, obviously the second leg of the Toulouse game, they went through, but they were really, really poor. I think they had 1 shot on target all night. Followed it up by the cup defeat to Sporting, and then, as you say, the 5-0 was just incredible. Haven't seen anything like that since Andre Villas-Boas days, 2010-11, that infamous 5-0. It was just so poor from start to finish, and I think the longer the game went on, the more and more the players just looked bereft of confidence. So I think this is a good time to play them, especially that the first leg is in Lisbon at the Stadio da Luz. So the fans will be there with sort of expectation and hoping. And you think, if Rangers can get a decent result there, and then the second leg back at Ibrox, I think there's a really, really good time. You could look at it the other way and say that Roger Smith has really got to get a reaction out of his players now, and this is the season, basically, because even the Champions League campaign was on record to be one of the poorest. I mean, they once lost every single game, and I think they'd lost the first 4, and there was a feeling that this could be another horrendous season. And it's almost came out of nowhere, because last season, for the majority of the season, they were flawless. So, yeah, I think definitely a good time to play them.
Yeah, it's a curious scenario, because I guess most kind of casual football observers would see Benfica coming out the hat and think, God, that's pretty tough for Rangers. But I guess even if you look at the league table, still second, just a point behind Sporting now, I think 6 ahead of Porto. On paper, it certainly looks like a tough tie. Do you expect it to be quite even then across the 2 legs?
To be honest, if it wasn't for the last sort of week or two, I'd have thought, yeah, this will be a really, really good clash. Not to say that I think Rangers are going into it the favourites, but I think it's definitely it'll be an interesting one, because I think when you look at Rangers' strengths as well and look at where Benfica's weaknesses are, they sort of align, because the left-hand side, especially for Benfica recently, they've been playing a lad called Morato, he's a centre-half, Brazilian centre-half, who's now playing sort of at left-back. They've had other players that have played in there trying to plug the gap. And when you think of how dangerous Rangers are coming down the right-hand side, especially if they can push, Tavernier further up the pitch, as they like to, you're thinking there could be joy there, because that's Porto, that's where they got their real joy the other day. Francisco Conceição was playing down that side, and Morato ended up getting taken off at half-time after he got a yellow card. So you're thinking if they can try and isolate the sort of fullbacks, because even on the other side, they've played Frederick Arsnes there, who's a central midfielder who can actually play further forward. He's had to sort of slot in. Defensively, they're just a bit weak, and Otamendi got sent off the other day. He's starting to get on now. Obviously, World Cup winning pedigree and stuff, but it's definitely got a mistake in him. So yeah, I think it will still be a good clash, and it depends obviously how Benfica approach the game, because if they start well, they've definitely still got enough talent in attacking areas that they can, really hurt Rangers, because someone like Rafa Silva been in incredible form this season. David Neres, when he's been in the team, has been great as well. They've got newer signings, the likes of Marcos Leonardo coming off the bench. Obviously, Angel Di Maria is one of those players that, he can be having a quiet game for 89 minutes, and then he'll pop up and produce that bit of magic that's taken him to the heights that he's been at in his career. So while I say it's a good time to play them, obviously you can't underestimate Benfica's ability to sort of grind out results even when they haven't played particularly well. As I say, they avoid defeat in that second leg against Toulouse, despite basically just getting peppered for the 90 minutes. And even in the first leg, it was 2 Di Maria penalties that saw them through.
And do you sense that, given these recent results and performances, that Roger Smith, the manager, is under significant pressure to get a result here?
He's under pressure in general at the minute, even regardless. I mean, that result on the weekend, that's going to pile pressure on any manager of the big 3. Yeah. If that would have happened to Porto or Sporting, it'd be the same thing. But I think the fans are starting to get a little bit agitated with not just the performances, but maybe his decision-making, his in-game management, his decision to start certain players, to keep certain players on the bench or bring them on sort of late in the game. So performances aside, I think the actual his management at the minute is winding people up, I think.
Okay, well, let's wrap up by putting you on the spot. Let me ask you for your prediction for the first leg and then for the tie overall.
The first leg, I think it'll be a draw. So I'm thinking I've got echoes of that last game in the group stage, the 2-2. Darwin Núñez came on late. 2-2. Because I think both teams are capable of scoring goals, even though Rangers have been doing well sort of defensively. I think Benfica have got strength in attacking areas, but that defence will let them down. And then second leg, I think Rangers might nick it, to be honest. Maybe a 1-0 win or a 2-1 win. But we'll see. I think one thing for sure, it'll be a good tie.
That was the Portuguese football expert Aaron Barton there, chatting to my colleague Al Lamont. What are you expecting from Benfica? I've had a look at the squad. There's obviously a lot of young talent in there. They've been renowned for bringing young players through, whether they pinch them from other clubs or what have you. They sell them on for massive fees. Think of Darwin Núñez and João Felix, players like that. Now when you look at some of the younger players that they've got in that side there, Antonio Silva, who's the centre-back, who plays alongside Nicolas Otamendi, World Cup winner with Argentina in 2022. João Neves, another fabulous young player, he's just 19. These two are already in the Portuguese national side. Orkun Kukçu came in from Feyenoord, record signing. Their goalkeeper, Anatoly Trubin, Ukrainian international. A couple of Brazilians in the forward areas, Leonardo Cabral, Rafa Silva, who scored against Rangers last time they were out here, and of course Angel Di Maria at the age of 36, still doing it, 14 goals this season.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, you've just named a lot of their players there, and obviously a very talented squad, a mixture of youth and also some real experience and quality in there as well. Look, you're getting to this point in the second biggest European competition. You're going to be facing teams that are going to be littered with quality, and I think the positive for Rangers is that they look back a couple of years ago and they faced teams of this ilk and made their way to the final, so it's not to be overawed by the occasion or by the team that you're facing, and I don't think that this Rangers team will be, and I certainly don't think that Philippe Clement will be. But what you can't do is show them too much respect and allow them on their home patch to kind of take over. And that's the worry for Rangers, is that because of what I outlaid with the poor performances recently, that they do get off to a really quick start and they really go at Rangers. Can Rangers hold out in that opening period? That's so key. But this is a quality side. You wouldn't expect anything else coming to a team of this size, that their squad's going to be littered with quality.
So it's about keeping the tie alive. It's the old cliche
100%.
for the second leg, which is in Glasgow. Both legs covered on Sports Sound on BBC Radio Scotland. Obrigado to Tomo.
Good.
For that, you like that? Bit of Portuguese
sayonara
thrown in there at the end. We'll wrap things up now. Thank you very much for listening. And remember, you can hear Benfica against Rangers live on Sports Sound on BBC Radio Scotland Extra from 7 o'clock. And for all the latest news, analysis and updates, just head to the BBC Sport Scotland website or the mobile app. And remember, we publish new episodes every weekday morning, so you can get your daily dose of Scottish football bright and early. If you haven't done so already, just follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Myself and Stephen will see you for the game.
The Scotland Rugby podcast is now available every Tuesday. Join me, Andy Burke and Tom English. Just head to BBC Sounds and subscribe to the Scotland Rugby podcast.
It's just seismic stuff.
There's bucket hats as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is this a rugby podcast or is this a fashion podcast?
Why can't it be a bit of both?
Rugby. Let's get on to rugby.
There's a lot to be excited about.
Today's guest, John McGuigan.
Clubs are at the absolute bedrock of everything Scottish rugby's about.
The Rugby Sports Sound podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.
You cannot help but be so excited.
It's going to be the centre of the rugby universe.
BBC Sounds.